Further subs. Question number 2, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Economic Development. Does he stand by all of the Minister of Economic Development's statements made regarding the Hobbit dispute?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, yes, because in my experience both the current and former Ministers of Economic Development in this government are fine and upstanding gentlemen.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he stand by the statement by the Minister of Economic Development in this House on October 28, 2010, when he said there had been no request or pressure from Warner Brothers to change our law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, yes. My understanding is at that stage that was the situation. And I would expand for the member in this regard is that the information released yesterday just shows how much risk there was that the Hobbit movies would not be produced in this country.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Is the Minister aware that that statement made on October 28, 2010 during the debate on the bill to introduce the law changes, so it came after the negotiations, and is he also aware of the correspondence from Caroline Blackwood of Warner's on 12th of October which referred to their deep concerns with our employment law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of the details of those particular communications, but it is apparent that there was concern about whether the Hobbit movies would be produced in New Zealand, and it is apparent that the law was changed and the Hobbit movies were produced in New Zealand.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
How can the statement by the Minister of Economic Development on October 28, 2010 that there had been no request or pressure from Warner Brothers to change our law be true when we have the email correspondence from Warner Brothers stating their deep concerns with New Zealand's employment law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, well, I haven't seen the original quote that the member is referring to, and of course there are differences in practice between what's a concern and what's requiring a law to be changed. But the fact remains, Mr. Speaker, is the government moved to clarify a law which was obviously causing concern for this industry, and as a result of it, this industry has been far more successful in New Zealand, and this government is very proud of that fact. That's right.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Will the Minister make himself familiar with the speech by the Honourable Jerry Brownlee in this House on 28th of October 2010, where Jerry Brownlee said, and I quote from Hansard, "I want to make it abundantly clear again that there has been no request or, the opposition would say, pressure from Warner Brothers to change our law." And if that statement is not true, will he request the Minister to come to this House and amend it?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I haven't had the opportunity to read that. I am working through Mr. Brownlee's speeches since 1996, since I've been in the House, because they are generally brilliant speeches, but I'm only up to 2002 at this point, so I have a fair way to run before I get to 2010.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Does the Minister think it's a laughing matter when a Minister of the Crown comes to this House and misleads this House, directly misleads this House by telling the House that there had been no pressure from Warner Brothers when the email traffic released just yesterday proves that there was very significant pressure from Warner Brothers to change our law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think what is a laughing matter is the fact that this member talks constantly about creating jobs in the New Zealand economy, but opposes every hands-on measure in which to do that.
Point of order. Dr. Russell
Mr.
Norman.
Speaker, the Minister was not addressing the question in any way whatsoever. I want to know the answer to the question. Does he think it's a laughing matter when a Minister misleads Parliament?
I think the member ought to go back and reread his own question to the Minister. The Minister very adequately responded to and addressed that question.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Point of order, Honourable
Speaker. I apologise for being somewhat late with this, because I thought the opposition or our opposition would have picked up the matter. Sir, there was an accusation in the House, unrefuted by the government, of deliberate misleading of the Parliament. Mr Speaker, I think that shouldn't be allowed to stay on the record, because, Mr Speaker, the right way of bringing that up is a breach of privilege.
Yes, I'm advised that it wasn't a suggestion of a deliberate misleading of Parliament, and if it was in the hands of the government they wanted to take objection, they are able to do so. Supplementary question, Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister now familiarise himself with the speech by Honourable Jerry Brownlee on 28th of October, where Jerry Brownlee said that there has been no request for or pressure from Warner Brothers to change our labour law, and if he discovers that I am in fact correctly quoting from Hansard, will he go to Jerry Brownlee and ask him to correct this statement, which is clearly untrue?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, in answer to the first part of the member's question, I may well at some point read that speech, but the government has no concerns about its actions that it took to get the Hobbit movies and other movies produced in this country. It's because we like to be hands-on and actually achieve some things for the New Zealand economy.
Point of order, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, that's not the question that the Minister was asked. What he's sought to do now twice is to duck out of it by making a statement to do with another issue, but not to do with whether... Can I finish off?
Order. I don't need any more assistance from the member. I don't need any further assistance from the member. The member asking the question answered a two-part supplementary question. The Minister rose and very satisfactorily answered the first part of that question. Supplementary question. Further supplementary question, Dr Russel Norman.
Will the Minister for Economic Development be correcting his clearly misleading statement that he made in this House during the Hobbit law debate that there had been no pressure from Warner Brothers to change our labour laws?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I need to point out to the member I wasn't the Minister for Economic Development at the time.
Speaker.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Nonetheless, Mr Speaker, he has responsibility. He is the Minister. He must answer the question.
I think the appropriate way forward is for the member to re-ask that question.
Okay. Supplementary. Will the Minister for Economic Development come back to this House to correct the statement he made that Warner Brothers had never pressured the government to change the labour law, given that there is clear evidence that Warner Brothers did pressure the government to change the labour law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I repeat that I was not the Minister at the time, but in any respect, the government is very happy with the decisions it's made in regards to the Hobbit movies and to the legislation change.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
So, Mr Speaker, are you saying that he addressed the question, given that he is the Minister and there is continuity in ministerial responsibility between Jerry Brownlee and Stephen Joyce?
No, I'm not, and I think on this occasion it's appropriate the member asks the question a second time, or now a third time.
I've got to remember it.
Yeah, it is varying a little bit. I appreciate that. Dr Russel Norman.
The essence of the question is, the record is very clear that the Minister of Economic Development said to this House there had not been any pressure or request from Warner Brothers to change our labour law, yet the email evidence is very clear that Warner Brothers did put pressure on New Zealand to change the labour law. So will the Minister for Economic Development correct the record in the Hansard?
Honourable Stephen Joyce. Order. I particularly want to hear the answer.
Well, Mr Speaker, I've struggled with this particular suggestion of the member because my question is how far back do I go in terms of responsibility as Minister for Economic Development, because I am no more responsible for the statements of my good friend the Honourable Jerry Brownlee as I could be for Jim Anderton or Trevor Mallard before them.
Point of order, Honourable David.
The problem with that answer is that he is responsible.
The difficulty I have here is the question has now been asked 3 times. It is not for me to satisfactorily design any answer to the satisfaction of the member asking the question. It is now for the House and the public to judge that answer itself. Point of order, Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
With respect, Mr Speaker, given your ruling, the fact that you allowed the member to ask the question 3 times presumably indicates that the minister had not complied with standing orders in even addressing the question. So to leave it there, I think is very unfair to the questioner, because the minister still has not complied, given what you've just said, with standing orders. That is grossly unfair to the questioner.
I think the minister has addressed the question. I accept maybe not to the satisfaction of the member asking the question. There has been 3 opportunities. That is quite sufficient, and the matter now will be for the public of New Zealand to judge the answer. Supplementary question. Is the member questioning my ruling?
No, I'm going to ask you a question, Mr Speaker.
Well, no, you're not. You're going to raise a point of order.
Yes, I am.
Yep.
My point of order is this. Is the new regime now, in effect, whereby a questioner, a member, can ask a question several times, with your indulgence, and then if the minister has not complied with standing orders, that's it. They've worn out their welcome, and the minister gets off the hook.
I appreciate the point raised by the member. At the end of the time, I have stated that, in my opinion, the question has been addressed. I am not arguing that it's been satisfactorily answered to the questioner's satisfaction or to any member of the opposition. The question has been addressed, and on that basis we are moving on. Further supplementary. Grant Robertson.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Did the Minister of Economic Development become aware that the blacklist on the Hobbit movie imposed by Actors Equity had been lifted before the 20th of October 2010?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I'm not exactly aware of that chronology, but I would point out to the member that there is no doubt that the blacklist, the damage caused by the blacklist had been done, and that the confidence of the industry was obviously affected, as is reflected in the correspondence.
Mr Speaker, we have the same problem here. We have the Minister of Economic Development, who is responsible for that portfolio and responsible for answering questions, and he has once again failed to answer a very direct question.
The question was, is the Minister aware? And he said he wasn't aware.
No. Do you want me to re-ask the question?
I think on this occasion that's the safest way forward.
Did the Minister of Economic Development become aware that the blacklist on the Hobbit movie imposed by Actors Equity had been lifted before the 20th of October 2010?
And I would have thought that was adequately answered, but I give the Minister another opportunity.
Well, again, Mr Speaker, I'm not aware of the exact chronology because there was a lot happening at that time, but if the member wants to put it down in writing, I'm sure we could address it for him. But the reality is that the damage in any event had been done in terms of the confidence of the industry.
Point of order, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, why are you allowing this minister to get up and say, no, I am not aware of the detail that's being asked, and then to bombast the House with the information that is not to do with the question? Why don't you set him down like you would anybody else?
Because on this occasion, I was absolutely sure that was the way the Minister answered in the first occasion. Mr Grant Robertson took a legitimate point of order suggesting the question hadn't been addressed. I wanted to listen to that being addressed. The question clearly has been addressed, and on that basis we will move on if there's any further supplementaries. Move to question number 3, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, in particular I stand by the statement that the opposition